This is my home rig setup. It's basic, but functional. It has no motion whatsoever except for, well, I used to race this with the chair, so there'd be a bit of motion from me thumping the steering around. But I love it. And it's a simple frame with a Logitech G Series wheel. I actually developed 2 games on this, Project Cars 1 and 2. So I've spent many an hour having fun in this seat. So this is actually the G29 wheel. Most of the driving I did I think it was on a G27. So seen quite a simple wheel. It's not direct drive. It's got 2 helical gears in here that motor this wheel because it give you the force feedback. And I was really happy with that. I actually preferred the more simplistic wheel to this one, and only upgraded to this one because it was compatible with the PlayStation. So we were developing for PC as well as for the platforms. Basically, this thing's got pretty much as you could want to use on a sim. It's got 900 degrees turning, so you can whip it around, get the opposite lock on, do some serious steering. The early days of sim racing, I used to have those ones that were attached to your table. This was after I was using keypad, because I was using keys to turn left and right on Grand Prix 2. Evolved to the steering wheel, snapped them all the time. So these things are really robust, and I found them to be incredibly reliable. You've got really nice trim on the steering wheel, hand stitched, I gather, with paddle shift that goes with the steering wheel. Even some car manufacturers can't get that right. So actually the paddles work really, really well. You've got some functions on here that I've never really used. You've got a nice little LED screen that lights up so you can change gear, and it's got a gear stick. Now, to be fair, the milkiest part of this rig I felt was the gearing, because this is so light and not really like any other sort of, any real road car basically. Is more resistance you'd expect. But actually, for learning how to clutch, heel and toe, do stuff like that, this was phenomenally accurate. And pedals wise, I was always very happy with this setup because it's got a potentiometer in it, so it basically gives you as much effect as the potentiometer reads in terms of movement. So if you move your foot 50%, you get 50% braking. So I was pretty happy with this, although a little bit spongy by comparison to some expensive rigs. Accelerator, the same thing. So the pedals are basic, but functional. They work really well. In terms of feedback through this steering wheel, okay, you're not going to get as much, I think it's like 2.5 Newton meters force through one of these things. So it's not really that heavy, but it's enough to feel a tug under braking. If you lock a wheel, or if you get a bit of oversteer, you might feel the steering wheel go light if you're at the apex. You get a little bit of a rumble from some understeer. So I found this quite a chatty setup. And for 178 quid, you can pick up this wheel and box and gear stick setup, plus whatever the cost of this is, probably going to bring you up to around £250 all in. Now let's compare that to the 2.5 million rig over here. Check this out. This is the Dynisma DMG1 super exclusive. They've only ever sold 5 of these things, $2.5 million a piece, and it's got every range of motion you can possibly have with a car. So the chassis that they're using on this rig is a McLaren Artura. So you can actually sit inside a real car with a real steering wheel that's connected through a direct drive system, as you would expect of something this level. And your brakes are attached to a hydraulic system that even has a servo. So you get the effect and feeling of a real brake pedal when you're hard on the brakes trying to slow down. They can actually adjust the amount of brake pressure using this thing here, which has got a stack of washers inside it. They can effectively stiffen the rate of braking, so you'll get more brake pressure under braking. So if you're copying something like a Formula 1 car or a Le Mans car, that's going to have a different pressure than a road car. But they can simulate all of that through here. So the driver controls can completely mirror real life. But that's not the really interesting part. The interesting part is the patent they've got on this technology that's completely different to anything else, because all motion rigs normally use hydraulic systems. And with a hydraulic system, there's an amount of time before you can break through the stiction in the system, the friction inside it that basically creates delay, latency, which means there's a delay between something that happens on the track and you feeling it through your backside, usually 30 or 40 milliseconds. Now, they don't use hydraulic systems. They've got these rocker arms that reduce the latency to 3 milliseconds. So you're talking 10 or more times faster than any other system in the world through these legs here. Effectively, all married up to give this the full range of motion. And these belts that are inside, that's what really makes them work so quickly, because it's effectively moving at the speed of electricity. So they can really fine-tune the exact and precise motions that you're getting on the track and very quickly feed that sensation through these legs into this rig, so you feel them instantaneously, or as close to instantaneous as possible. So there are 6 planes of motion in the universe. You've got pitch, forwards and backwards. You've got roll, side to side. You've got up and down, side to side, forwards and backwards, and yaw. So that's pretty much what a car can do. So you might get vertical changes over bumps if you go off-road, or even you're going over a curb on a racetrack, something like that. But added to that, you've got these additional ranges, 3 of them on this rig, that takes it to the next level. So if you look down, you can see these rail systems, so that basically, as this car tips or slides across, these legs can basically move the car sideways to give you that sensation, or try and give you the equivalent of a G-force effect. It starts the motion here very, very quickly, 3 milliseconds, and then added to that, you get a full range, 1.3 meters of movement through these rails. And if you look underneath it, you see how this triangle equates into a very fluid motion for side to side, forwards and backwards, and up and down. All techers underneath this. It's mind-boggling. You'd think you might actually position this car on an arm, and an arm could move the car in any range it wanted to. But then you think about how the force is affected through that arm. You'd have bouncing and movement and things like that that you wouldn't want, because that all translates back to the driver as a miscue, basically. Tells you lies about what the car's really doing. And all you need to feel as a driver is what is the point of the contact of the tyre onto the track, and how that feeds back through the steering wheel, through your bum, into your brain, so that you can initiate your reflexes. Massive wraparound screens to give you that full texture of peripheral vision, powered by 5 projectors, plus a massive room to fit all this stuff in. That's what costs 2.5 million. So there's only one left thing to do, which is to get in and try it out. So McLaren steering wheel, very familiar looking scene. But down here, you've got stuff you wouldn't expect to see in a sim. So you've actually got control over the ABS, you can change the levels, and you can adjust the brake bias on the fly, which is exactly as you would in a racing car. So you can have more braking effect on the front or the rear, and you can adjust the traction control. So when you're sitting in here, it does feel like you're in a real car, because you're sitting in a real car. So we'll see how immersive it is when you actually drop the clutch and head off. This hasn't got a clutch, but you know what I mean. Green button. All right, here we go. Brilliant. All right. Oh, there go the actuators on the rockers. So I'm now landed in the sim completely at one of my favorite tracks, Spa-Francorchamps in a GT3. So this should be pretty cool. So the vision already can see like all around, can move your head as you would do normally in a racing car, and see pretty much, yeah, everything you'd expect to see at Spa, except the hot dog stands, so I miss those. All right, first gear, and floor it. Oh, whoa. Which I forgot to ask what would happen if I crashed the rig, which is quite expensive. I hadn't thought that far ahead. I hope it's insured. All right, here we go. Into the hairpin. Wow, really good feedback through the wheel. So the first thing you sort of concentrate on is the visual elements. Feel the track flowing, especially when you're heading towards a fast one like Eau Rouge. Really feeling the steering wheel loading up in the middle of the corner when the downforce is very high and there's a massive amount of force going through the front axle. So it's really good. You could feel that replicated through the wheel as well as the motion. All right, so late on the brakes for Lecom. Oh, slight lockup. So that's really interesting, because so normally the lockups, quite often with motion rigs or just any rig, like my little Logitech, which doesn't have any motion, you feel a lockup through the steering wheel, like a little tug. And with this one, actually it's translating as a yaw in the front axle. So effectively the front of the car is just darting away from the apex. So it's a really intuitive cue. And presumably then, if I adjust the brake bias to the rear, which I've just done, so I've gone about 2%. So I had 60% on the front, now I've got 58% braking force on the front wheels. So I've pushed more braking effort to the rears. Okay, I'm still locking the fronts, so I'm going to go a little bit to the back, a bit more to the rear. But pretty amazing that you can feel that braking force through the axle thanks to the yaw. And this sim has 45 degrees of yaw capacity, so that you really can get quite sideways and feel that physically as the car turns on the rig. Moment of truth in a GT car is blanchiment. Is it flat or is it not? Flat, very good. Well done, Ben. So try some late braking. There's some serious locked up. And overdid it. Interestingly there, so this rig is also very good at transmitting high frequencies, so you get the harmonic from the engine coming directly through actually pretty much the chassis as well as in your ears, which is super helpful. So when you lock a rear wheel, you can hear the engine dropping off basically, which is another genuine cue from the real world, the audible cue. So when the engine dies, it's because the rear wheels have stopped momentarily. Oh, I crashed. So I crashed. I've gone I'm on a nice journey. It's like the racing team put me straight on the plane. It's like you crashed at Eau Rouge on your second lap, get on the airplane and go back to wherever it was you came from. That is what would and should happen really in motorsport. I'm getting a beautiful view of the track though. It's like being in a helicopter, my own private pilot. Oh, it looks so peaceful down there. No cars going around, it's got nature, some trees. There's the sea out to the front. It possibly really what's happened is I've died and gone to heaven. This is what it feels like at the end of your time. Oh. The yaw is amazing because that taps straight into the medulla oblongata or something in your brain that can sense that turn. It's the same human instinct we've developed over millions of years so that you know when you get out of the shower and slip over, your foot feels it and your brain reacts, tries to stop you from bumping your head. So that yaw that feeds through on this system moves very, very quickly. So there's no latency between what your bum feels and what your eye sees. So on a lot of sims, you're very reliant on the visuals. And I've become quite lazy and attuned to that. So in fact, coming into this and feeling the immediacy through the seat and not having to rely and wait for a visual reference to tell you that you're spinning, by which time it's usually too late. But the frequency of the engine coming through the chassis and audibly is also a really powerful tool. It's just another instinctive cue. So you know if you brake too hard on the rear, locks up, you can hear the engine die off and respond by releasing pressure to moderate how much force you're putting through. Spa is just such a fantastic track, and there's so many ways around here with different lines, using curbs, staying off them. And that's kind of the whole point of this system, is teams can build their own car into this rig to develop it for different tracks. The Spa is also quite physical, so I may start sweating in a minute because there's a reasonable amount of force coming through the wheel, certainly more than my little G29 is capable of. So when you're flat through Blanchimont, you really feel the bumps and what happens when the car wags its tail, and it requires quite a serious response to keep it on the island. I'm always pretty scrappy through this corner, and you have to be. Oh, yeah. I've done it again. Well, I meant to pit anyway. Since I've got to the track to myself, it's safe to break the speed limit, I think, through the pits. No one's here to tell me off. See if I can keep the tail under control a bit better. I've noticed though that the bus stop is one of the hardest things for sim builders to recreate accurately because it's very tight. In low speed corners, the driver has to be much faster with the controls than in a high speed corner. And historically, sims tend to be far too aggressive. If you go past the limit of the tyre, on a sim, it tends to really drop off in grip level and makes it very easy to spin. Real life, you've got a bit more time and control in hand to deal with it. Plus, there's those big curbs there, which in a real car, the car doesn't mind too much. You can ride these curbs to cut the corner, and it's difficult to replicate that. So I'm going to be curious if I start really driving like a hooligan, how the car handles the curbs. I just love it. You can really adapt the chassis by moderating the throttle, as you should be able to. It's really reactive and responsive. Poo on such a difficult one. The cars tend to understeer through here. It's squat as you get on the power. hurling it in here through the curbs. All right, I definitely have got too much rear bias on, so I'm just gonna send it to the front. I've got 51%, so that's very neutral. I'm gonna go up to 52, which is normally where I have my race car set, and see if I can be a bit more disciplined under braking. It's really good motion through the fast stuff. All right, here we go. So big brake slightly early actually. But I just wanted to get onto these curbs and not miss the apex and see how she feels. Yeah, really good. It's a classic one. You can make a real numpty of yourself when the tyres get worn by spinning at that corner, and ditto this one. There's always a lot going on at the hairpin. I wasn't paying attention, gone wide. Oh jeez. I've done another Jacques Villeneuve at Eau Rouge. I'm actually finding it difficult to pick up the cues through Eau Rouge. So Blanchimont, I'm finding I've got pretty good feeling for it, but at this point, to be fair, I'd be coming in to the pits to tell the team that it's got too much oversteer, because it's quite unusual for a car to behave that way. So I think the feedback is talking to me, but the car is set with so much front aero that it's really hard to hang on to the tail through that corner. So I'm going to have to use a little bit of imagination just to keep myself on the island, live to drive another day. But the balance in the medium speed is really good. Really good turn in, and I can make the car sit down with the power. All right, moment of truth this time. Still want to carry enough speed to keep my aero working. All right. Just goes light over this hill. Oh, made it that time. Of course, that's the thing, is there's no risk reward with the sim. So you can't need somebody standing next to you with a tiger or something. It's like, I will put the tiger in the seat with you if you misbehave, or hit you in the hands with a hammer, or I don't know, make you eat unreal meat. Love it. You can just absolutely scrabble into these corners, which is so much the nature of Spa. There's just little fractions of time everywhere that all add up to quite a big amount. So you'd be driving very similar laps, but be a second off the pace until you really crack these nuances and just find these little tiny gains, an inch here, there, just to get on the throttle a tiny bit earlier or carry a tiny bit of extra speed. Working up a nice little sweat here. The guys have just told me on the earphones that they've upped the cues on the yaw and lateral loading, so I'm going to get more force going through the chassis of this rig now. And It's an interesting one because your brain compensates for things very, very quickly. I think I'm so focused now on where I'm going. My body has kind of adopted the forces. It'd be interesting to see how much I can notice the difference in terms of chassis movement. Oh, there's a lot going on there in 6th gear. Half the trick with this as well is to not have too much motion. I think that's what's great with the rig, is that it's not jumping up and down. I've noticed with a lot of the hydraulic ones, sometimes the actual, you look at the rigs someone else is driving, it actually leaves the ground. And that isn't realistic. But being able to feel the texture of the road and the bumps in the curb strikes as they come in, totally immerses you in what you're doing. Definitely still running too much rear brake, but it's getting me in the corner. The thing I really like is the braking force. Using the hydraulic system as per a real car, it feels exactly as you'd expect. You get that sense of brake pressure instead of having something that's really spongy. Like, you know, understandably at that price point, you're not going to be able to have something that's as sophisticated as fluids with a cylinder and everything like that to give you that feedback, basically. And in this, it just feels really natural. And it means you can moderate brake pressure very, very quickly. Yeah. Well, I'm sold. All I need to do is just squirrel that money away, sell my rig, put 250 quid in the bank, and in about 1,000 years, I'll be able to afford one of these. And then hire a team of 4 as well to help me run it, because I'm not good with tech, as we know. And the beauty as well is, once you're actually running, I mean, it's fairly efficient because you don't actually need to use any real fuel. So there's a massive saving to be had if you commit to the upfront cost. Why wouldn't you? It's a no-brainer. I might invest in a fan and buy a fan to go with it. Splash out, keep you cool. So this made for a pretty solid comparison. If you've got the space, the cash, the time and a team of technicians living in your house to oversee proceedings, then the Dynisma rig is the rig for you. However, if your finances don't quite stretch to 2.5 million, then you can climb aboard something far less expensive like this little Logitech and probably turn the same lap time. The real difference then is the full immersion, being able to actually develop a real racing car using a simulator, as well as honing the skills and instincts you can transfer to the real world. That's an amazing experience, so I'm going to go have a shower and stay tuned for the next one, because I might try and take on a Formula 1 driver.